what is, I guess, almost the beginning of Startup Week. And I am pleased to introduce our speaker today, Chandra McMahon, and I'm cheating here with my little notes, is a Senior Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer at Verizon. She also happens to be one of the very first people I spoke to after I took on the CISO role here for Penn State. In that role, she's responsible for setting information security strategy, policy, standards, architecture, and everything else that's related. And her team works across all of Verizon's units to secure the company and their networks. Prior to joining Verizon, she held leadership positions with Lockheed Martin, including serving as the company's Chief Information Security Officer, and most recently as the Vice President of Commercial Markets. And in that role, she was responsible for developing and delivering a portfolio of cybersecurity and information technology solutions and services for a bunch of Fortune 500 companies in the financial sector, the utility sector, technology companies, all sorts of companies. She has briefed the White House and congressional staff, various U.S. government officials on cybersecurity matters as a sought-after speaker, so we're pleased to have her with us today. And is active in promoting cybersecurity information sharing partnerships between the U.S. government and industry. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Industrial Engineering and Operations from Virginia Tech, as well as a Master's degree in Engineering Science from Penn State.
Yes.
So please join me in welcoming Chandra, and with that,
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sears. Well, good afternoon to those of you with me here in the Cybertorium and those of you joining us through the live streaming capability. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. I started my weekend coming to the campus to State College and seeing the Amy Schumer concert. And I'm going to finish here with you today talking about one of my great passions, which is about cybersecurity. So as Dr. Sears shared with you a little bit about my background. Right now, I serve as the Chief Information Security Officer, and I'm focused on everything cybersecurity as it pertains to Verizon. But my path to here was very different, and I want to share a little bit of that with you because I think it's important for those of you here that are studying IST, and also specifically in the SRA program, whether it's computer science or electrical engineering. I started out, as Dr. Sears says, an industrial engineering ops research major. But far away from security, but always in a technology space. And I had some really great career opportunities, and I used this formula. My formula early in my career was any job that I took, I wanted, at the beginning of my career, right out of college, was 30% I brought capability and 70% learning. I wanted to be in an environment where I was learning something new each and every day. And as I moved through and progressed in my career, that formula changed a little bit, but it never tipped over 60% bringing the skills I have and 40% learning. And so what got you here doesn't get you there. I'm sure many of you have read that book. I have done a lot of different things, but in the last 10 years have focused on cybersecurity. I built conference centers and hotels. I got to select the draft beer and design a bar. That was really cool. I've done satellite ground systems. I've worked in a lot of different industries. I've worked in agriculture. I've worked in pharmaceutical, aerospace and defense, spacecraft, aircraft, and now I work at Verizon in telecommunications. So a very broad background, and with this formula that I've used in terms of learning, it's about creative problem solving, right? Getting in there and designing new capabilities, innovating new processes, new technologies, new products and services to aid and support the company that I was serving or working for at the time. And so I hope that as all of you continue your studies here, and even as you launch into the great careers you will have ahead of you, that you will come up with your own formula about the skills you want to build and how you select your assignments and how you grow through that. Now, it took me a number of different assignments, whether it was satellite ground systems working for the government, I did a lot of different things, learned a lot about overall business process, business acumen. I can sit across from the CFO and I can talk numbers, and I can turn around and talk to my lead cyber architect about technology issues. And I would encourage all of you to think about, as you grow in your careers and in your professional pursuits, about exploring different industries, different types of roles that you can figure out what you're really passionate about and then focus on that and go. Now, I had an opportunity to go do a lot of different things. I was Lockheed Martin's Chief Information Security Officer for a number of years. I was in the chair when there was the RSA token issue. How many of you remember that? Right? I was in the chair when that happened, and I had to turn off remote access for 85,000 people to the company. Talk about business disruption. I moved from that role to a commercial cyber practice, and I was running a business selling commercial cyber products and services to the Fortune 500 companies, mostly critical infrastructure. So financial services, oil and gas, energy, and several others. And then I had the wonderful opportunity to join Verizon. And the reason I went to Verizon is because I had had a legacy and a history of working for companies that had high integrity, and they did hard things. They built things that people only thought about, right? They created the future. And so one of the reasons that I'm at Verizon right now is because we are creating the future, and we are powering individuals' lives and companies' growths and ideas. I've worked at small companies. I've worked at the very largest of companies. And I think one of the things that was really exciting in the part of my cybersecurity background was worked with a lot of startups. Went over to Israel, learned more about some of the really great technology that's going on over there. I've met with a lot of security startup companies, as well as the big providers, the vendors that are out there. And as a CISO right now, I leverage hundreds of products and services to be able to secure all of Verizon. So I think that it's about, since we're talking about Startup Week and innovation, it's about creating yourself and creating your future and creating products and services that companies will be able to leverage. Now, Verizon. Most people know us for our wireless service, carry around your phone. They know us for our FiOS, or our internet service providing that we do. How many of you are aware that we acquired AOL last year? Okay. So with the acquisition of AOL, we're doing a lot more in terms of content delivery. We have brands under AOL, HuffPost, TechCrunch, and Gadget. Really, really cool stuff. We have a growing business in IoT, the Internet of Things. We have a large telematics platform. And right now, one of the great things I love about working for Verizon is I get to try out all our new technology. Not only do I get to try it out, I have to figure out how the heck am I going to secure this stuff? And when it launches and users start using it, how secure will it be? And how will we be able to maintain the security of it over its mission life, over its operating life? So for me, it's really exciting to be at a company that we do cybersecurity at the top end. When a lot of companies you go and work at, they have IT security. They're focused on their enterprise IT systems, right? They've got to run all their business systems, their internet-facing applications, and they've got to secure all of that. Yep, got to do that. Our company, where we make our bread and butter and drive our revenue, is in our networks. The reliability of our networks, of our internet services, of our wireless networks as well. And then we have the new products where we're doing research and driving out new products and trying those out. And so for me, what I love about it is I get to see the full gamut at Verizon of information security. We have consumer facing. We have to deal with PCI standards. We have to deal with ISO 27001. We have to deal with privacy. We have to deal with our own regulatory requirements. And so for me, the demands of what's required to secure this vast infrastructure and make sure that every time somebody holds their phone up, they get the connectivity and the services that they need is like paramount. And it's, for me, it's really, really exciting. So let's talk a little bit about our networks. They are extremely reliable. When we talk about securing our networks, we are talking about securing hundreds of thousands of network elements. Think 500,000 more. All devices out there running, part of our network infrastructure that we have to secure and maintain the security of it. Now, we led with the 4G LTE. And right now, if you think about what Verizon's doing, we're focused on 5G, right? Next generation wireless. And from that perspective, we're looking at how are we going to change our networks to be able to support all the IoT devices and every endpoint that's connecting into them. And that's an incredible challenge. In addition to that, like if you think about, Verizon just released an IoT report, right? It's all about IoT. So let me read you some stats. The stats from our report says 2014, there were 9.7 billion endpoints. 9.7 billion. In 2020, the prediction is 30 billion endpoints will be connected into the network. 30 billion endpoints doing all sorts of different things across all industries, supporting people, supporting companies, supporting economies. And so for me, as I think about our networks and everything that's going to be connected in, whether it's wireless, landlines, whatever, right? How do we secure that broad ecosystem? That's a really exciting challenge. When you think about some of the creative ideas that people are going to come up with, we've been doing a lot in agricultural tech, vineyards, that's kind of cool, right? We have measuring systems, sensoring systems that feed information. Then we have our data scientists look at it and it figures out what's the exact amount of water and nutrition to deliver to the plant so we can maximize great growth. And you know, so you're doing things like that. To things like telematics, where you're putting things in individuals' cars, whether it's engine diagnostics, whether it's communication, roadside assistance, and all that. The world is definitely expanding with IoT. And for every new technology, I'm sure you know as well as I do that security lags, right? Because what do companies do when they create their first product, unless they're a security company? If they're a security company, they're thinking about security first and how they deliver a security solution. But all these new products that you're going to go out and buy, or the companies would go out and buy, they create the product to provide the functionality, right? And then they kind of think about security after. What I'm excited about is all of you, as you graduate from this program, you're going into the world thinking security first and foremost. And I'm going to be able to count on you to make sure that you're embedding security, whether it's through the software development lifecycle of something, or you're working at the operating system level, or you're working with firmware or whatever, that you're going to have embedded security in that. So when I, as a CISO, say, I'm connecting your stuff into my networks, or I'm using your product and services, I don't have to worry so much that I'm going to fall victim to a massive cyber attack, or that my business is going to be disrupted because your product or service couldn't withstand a cyber attack. You guys thinking this way? Yeah? Okay. Good. Okay. Some of the changes in security, it's been really radical in the last 5 to 10 years. And I was talking with Dr. Sears. He took on that role and said he's been 7 months, right? Okay, so here's the thing. From a veteran CISO, okay? Dog years to person years is 7 to 1, right? Yep. Cyber years, 10 to 1. Every year of cyber that you have is the equivalent of 10 years of experience, because this field is so dynamic and changing that any job that you take in that first year, you're going to, especially if you have to deal with some significant cyber issues in supporting your company, you are going to compress and get more experience in that year than you would if you were in another role in a business, in finance, or some of the supply chain or some of those other roles. You're going to learn more, you're going to be exposed to more because of what's going on in the cyber world right now. So here's why. So I was at the RSA Security Conference out in earlier this year, the first week of March. Huge security conference, fantastic one to go to as a conference attendee, or even me as a CISO, go to meet with all the vendors out there, not only established ones, but also the new startups. What kind of products and services are they bringing to market? 7 years ago, if you went to that conference, there were probably 125 vendors in the expo. This year, how many do you think? Over 500. Over 500 vendors had booths up at that conference compared to 5 to 7 years ago. That is how radical things are changing in this field. And I'm constantly looking for new technology that can help me address a gap. So, as you think about how do you build great products and services, you got to do a couple things. One is, technology-wise, they got to be really good. They've got to be resilient, both in their operations as well as in their security. You need a great business plan. I've seen some really great ideas, products and services. You have a bad business plan, you're out, which is why partnerships become important. How do you partner with key people, other businesses, to help champion your product or service, help you create a really exciting business plan that you can go execute about? And the most important thing is being able to see market shifts and make that transition. Just kind of stay ahead of the curve in terms of the product and service that you're doing. So when I think about being a CISO, I think about this broad ecosystem. So I've explained to you how expansive the Verizon infrastructure and systems are, right? You all kind of have a sense of that. 175,000 employees, 225,000 people have access to our systems because we have thousands and thousands of business partners, and they're all connected into our environment, right? So there's this ecosystem, and it starts with what's happening externally to me as a company and as a cybersecurity leader at Verizon. So think about legal and regulatory. How many of you paid attention to the fact that we passed legislation in December of 2015 called the Cyber Information Sharing Act? Okay, good. Those of you that didn't raise your hand, you've got to start paying attention now to what's going on from a legal and a regulatory perspective. There's not a single agency in the US or across the world that's not flexing their muscles in cyber. They want more from a company in data breach reporting. They want more in terms of industry standards. How many of you are familiar with the president's executive order that was filed at the beginning of 2014? Okay, if you don't know about it, look it up. You all should know that the president signed an executive order about cybersecurity in 2014. And as part of that, there was a whole bunch of different things the US government did with regards to the State Department issuing a set of standards around if somebody's going to harm the US from a cyber perspective, we're going to take action, right? From a regulatory perspective, what about data privacy? If you follow what's going on in data privacy, every country has some level of data privacy regulation. Some are creating it, some have had the regulation, some are enforcing it. How many of you are paying attention to the EU data privacy change that's coming in 2018? Okay, fewer hands. Got to pay attention to that one. And this is why. Because one of the provisions in there is if you have a privacy breach, you could have to pay a fine up to 4% of your global annual revenue as a fine. So, from a data privacy perspective, every country has different laws and regulations, different enforcement actions that they'll take, and you as technology leaders and technologists have to think about how do we design our systems so that as I'm moving data across the world and storing data in certain countries, what does that mean if I have a data loss? And the US state data breach laws are different than global country laws. We hold different fields, fields as being PII or personally identifiable information that's different from other countries. So that's another area, the data privacy, whereas we as technology, we've got to pay attention to how the trends are moving, and we've got to be able to consult and support the businesses that we work for in understanding, oh, we've got data moving across these global countries, it's stored here. What will the data privacy rules require? What will law enforcement require if somebody steals your data in a country? Can you work, who would you be working with to go after the bad guys in that country, right? Fraudsters and others. So I'd encourage you to pay attention to some of the things going on, legal and regulatory. Okay, let's talk about the types of attacks that Verizon normally comes under and every day, and any day at any time. So I did a presentation recently to our leaders, and we see everything from spam malicious emails, denial of service. Now we see it coming at us, as well as against our customers, right, because we are an internet service provider. Account harvesting, a lot of folks out there trying to account harvest, steal credentials so then they can then perform fraudulent acts. Malware. Secure coding is one. Trying and making sure that all of your developers are doing secure coding practices and they're not doing something they shouldn't be doing, like coding username, password in clear text and logging it to a log file, those type of things we want to make sure don't happen. So secure coding we see. Social engineering attacks is really big right now. White hat reports, where security reporters report a security incident, say, hey, we think you have a vulnerability. Here's our data around that. If you do these 5 things this way, your system is vulnerable. Insider threat. Insider threat, a lot of CISOs nowadays are worried about insider threat, not just who's coming at you externally, but also whether or not employees would be motivated to do harm to the company and to steal data. And fraud. We see a lot of fraud activity in terms of those financial cyber criminals. So we deal with adversaries that range from hacktivists to cyber criminals to nation-state actors, and all of that makes for very exciting work in terms of defending an enterprise. Now, I love security. I love the offense and the defense of it. The fact that the playbook changes. And so when we talk about innovation, the bad guys are innovating as much as the good guys in terms of their defense. And you see that as we look at, there's a lot of focus on spearfishing, right? Everywhere you go, they talk about spearfishing, right? A lot of large attacks were started with spearfishing, right? Well, years ago, spearfishing was an email. Now we have emails that are spoofing domains. We have emails that can't be identified by the leverage of COTS, custom off-the-shelf software. You really need some special email capabilities to identify those. We've got man-in-the-middle attacks, where the adversary goes and takes out a supplier, compromises their email, and then from that foothold, then launches attacks into their business partners. So that to me is kind of exciting, because you go from the crufty, noisy attacks to the really stealthy, sophisticated attacks. And our job as defenders, net defenders, is to see all of that, be able to detect it, prevent it first, if not detect it, and be able to respond to it in a very aggressive way to shut it down. So I love the fact that being in security, innovation happens each and every day, because the bad guys change their playbook, the good guys change their playbook, and it's not 2 football teams on the field going at it, right? We know that very well, being Penn Staters, right? Think of it as 1 football team on the field and every other football team on the field with you coming at you. And they've got different playbooks. They have different offensive capabilities, they have different playbooks, they have different sets they run, and you are doing defense against all of those different offenses at once. And that for me is really exciting, and it never gets boring. So what are the things that keep a CISO up at night? Would anyone hazard a guess? Okay, I'll share with you what I read in the newspaper sometimes. Now, don't believe everything you read in the newspaper or in the media. Some of it's not actually factually correct. How many have been, are familiar with Operation Duststorm? Okay. Operation Duststorm was a recently identified set of attacks, a very orchestrated attacks over a period of 5 years on the country of Japan, focused on multiple of their critical infrastructure industries. And I'd encourage you to go look that up and understand, because that's the world we live in. We live in a world where the adversaries are focused, in that case, was on a nation, and went after their financial services sector, their transportation sector, their energy sector, to gather information, right, and steal data, and possibly even get set up to do something more significant there. That kind of keeps me up at night. The rise of ransomware, right? Everybody's tracking that trend, the rise in ransomware. You know, we had that hospital, I think it was in LA, right? Took over their data, asked for $17,000 to get their data back, right? We're seeing an increase in ransomware occurring across the board. Then, how many of you heard about the Ukraine power outage? Okay, a couple. So at the end of last year, Ukraine had several 100,000 people without power. It was because of a destructive cyber attack. And it was launched on several providers, power providers, utility providers, where they went in and they were able to disrupt service and also disrupt the call centers such that people couldn't even report in outages. Those are just, what I've shared with you are just 3 examples that were recently in the paper. And so when you think about your role and the value that you can bring to companies in the future, either creating your own company with your own product and service that you're going to launch to help companies deal with these challenges, or joining small, medium, large companies to help defend, these are the type of real-world, live-fire situations you're going to be in, where your ability to think and creatively problem solve and be able to take the playbook that you have and realize when you got to throw it away and create a whole new playbook to defend, that is going to take a lot of initiative, innovation, creative problem solving, and sheer will and determination. And then, of course, you have Anonymous targeting Donald Trump, right? The normal hacktivists get involved, create targeting, and in some cases have some success. In another case, they, they vocally talk about what they're going to do. But no matter what, as a company security defender, when those threats when those threats are made, you still have to react. You have to react as if that threat is real and it's going to occur. So we've had hackers put us in our sites. How many of you have read about some of the recent Verizon matters? Oh, not been doing your research, huh? Okay. So you will have seen any large company. I will never stand up in front of you and say, hey, no issues ever whatsoever. We run major infrastructure at scale with hundreds of millions of customers accessing our systems. We are a global company. We've got data moving everywhere. And we've had our fair share when the hackers put their sights on us, as well as our peer in government, right? Social engineering attacks, we see those regularly. We just had one recently reported about a data loss. Anybody read about that one? Oh, okay, I'll fill you in. Don't read everything. Don't believe everything you read in the newspaper. There was an article that was in the news today, and it's horribly inaccurate. But we had an account harvesting situation where we lost some data records. Now, fortunately for us, we detected it within days, And we mitigated it immediately, but we did lose some data. And we went through all the privacy and all the legal requirements and the contractual requirements we have with customers, and we determined we didn't have a lot of requirements to notify, but we decided we would notify. And we started those notifications, telling customers what had happened. We had lost basic contact information, name, company, email address. And during those notifications, it hit the press because the hacker was on the other side trying to sell our data. But I work for a company that does the right thing no matter what. We looked at everything and it said, yep, we don't have obligations in certain cases to notify. In some of the global countries we did, right? But we contacted customers anyway and say, you need to know about this. Because it's about intelligence. It's about knowing your adversaries and what they're doing. And the more intelligence you have about the information they have about you, the better you're able to defend. Now, more reading for you. How many of you heard of the Data Breach Investigations Report? Okay, you guys have some homework to do. You didn't know this. Verizon issues a data breach investigation report every year. We've been doing it for a decade now. It has information on over 8,000 real breaches that have occurred across a wide section of companies and industries. And in there, it classifies all those breaches, the cause of them, down to 9 incident classification patterns. 9. And then what it does is it maps out what industries, which 9 incident patterns, whether it's a web app attack or insider threat or one of the others, what industries see the most, right? So you would expect that the financial institutions would see point of sale, right? Credit card skimmers as a high profile because of the financial gain. So I'd recommend that you get a chance, look at the DBIR, and if you think about the industry that you're going into from a security perspective, go and say, okay, if I go to that industry, here are the top 3 targets, attack vectors that I'm gonna have to face and help the company deal with. We also released the Data Breach Digest, and this one's kind of good, because it talks about pirates. So if you like reading about pirates, you wanna read this. The Data Breach Digest takes 18 different real breaches, and like Law and Order at the end where it says we protect the names and fictitious characters and all that, they anonymize it, but they walk you through an attack defend card for each of those breach incident categories. It's pretty cool reading, so I'd encourage that you do that. Okay. Watch time. The other thing I would say is when you look at the DBIR, we talk a lot about spearfishing. Some of the stats are, if you spearfish individuals, 23% of them will open the emails, 11% will open attachments, and 9% will follow the embedded link and enter personal data. Well, I hope none of you are the 9%, because you have been trained and educated to know what to look for from an email security perspective. What percentage of intrusions leverage stolen, weak, default, or easily guessed credentials? More than 25%? Say more than 25% leverage weak, default, easily guessed credentials? Keep your hand up. More than 50? Put your hands up. You can't be wrong. More than 50? 60%? 70%? 80%? Where are you up there? Got it right, 80%. 80% of intrusion leverage weak default credentials. So I hope you guys are all going out there and changing your passwords. So I hope that you'll take the time. We have the Innovation Expo tomorrow, right? I hope you'll take the time to stop by and see the Innovation Expo, because I'm really excited about some of the technologies we're going to be sharing with you. We have our next-gen virtual reality, Oculus Rift, our social entertainment platform, Go90, and we've got a 4G LTE wearable camera called Liquid Image. And those are just some of the things that will be at the Innovation Expo tomorrow. I hope you'll stop by and see those and kind of think about what the world will be like with these technologies embedded and leveraged fully. So in closing, before I take questions, what I'd like to share is I'm so excited that you all are in and have an interest in security. 0% unemployment. Bring all your friends, please. Because as a CISO for Verizon, I need really smart people that are able to creatively problem solve, that can create a playbook. They don't need to be given a playbook and follow, oh, go to page 5, this step here, hit the checklist, check the box. That's not what I need in terms of being able to defend a company like Verizon. And I can tell you my peer CISOs in the financial institutions, the large utilities, in telecommunications, in many of the critical infrastructure industries, we need creative problem solvers. We need folks that can think like the adversary, that can be able to detect issues in terms of the billions and I can't even, we operate at scale 40 billion, trillion events we're pulling in our systems, doing analysis on, trying to figure out where's that suspicious activity. Those are the type of skills and ingenuity and creativity that we're looking for to serve us in our business. To be able to protect the massive infrastructure we have so we can continue to operate and be a viable business. To serve our customers and help them be more secure. Those are some of the things that are critically important. I think the other thing is, what I've learned is you want to find your passion. I did not start out in information security, but I can tell you as of now, I will never leave it. I will never leave it, even if it's 10 cyber years to a year in terms of experience and worry and let's get things done. Find your passion and take chances and risks and explore things. Create your own formula. Remember we talked about that earlier? What percentage of skills are you going to bring? And what is it you want to learn? And how do you increase the tools in your toolkit? Are you adding more tools with that next assignment? Or are you taking the tools you have and learning to use them as a master craftsman? But I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to have an opportunity to lead a fantastic set. I have hundreds of security professionals. But really at Verizon, our motto is cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. It's my executive business leaders' responsibility to understand what the impact of a cyber attack or the security of their systems could mean to them financially. It's my mid-level leaders and my first-line leaders who are trying to get the work done that they're thinking about security. It's my technology leaders, whether I'm doing software-defined networking, whether I'm doing DevOps or cloud or mobility. How are we building, design, build, and operate? How are we defending, right? It's not just design, build, and operate. It's design, build, operate, and defend all of that, right? So I'd like to, at this point, open it up for questions. I think what we have is we have open to those in the room, and I think there are a couple that can click in for questions, right? Okay, so let me turn it over to you. My time is yours.
Is there anybody with any questions?
We have one up here. Good afternoon.
Hi, I just want to know what the biggest differences are, like in your day-to-day responsibilities after switching and just from such different industries, like from aerospace going to Verizon. Like how different does that look at the top level for you?
Okay. So the question was, how different is the view being in the role I'm in from an aerospace and defense to a telecommunications company? So not that different. It's similar in the sense that both companies that I work for, the one I previously worked for and the one now, they're technology companies. They build things that people haven't thought of yet, right? So from that perspective, there's heavy R&D, there's a lot of that. Now they're building it for different purposes. So in terms of that, it's all similar. The ecosystem's a little bit different. So the regulations between a telecommunications with FCC and what defense has are radically different. The other thing is, Verizon has consumer-facing apps, right? We have individuals that log into our systems to buy their next phone, upgrade their phone, pay their bills. The previous company I worked for did not have the consumer experience. So from that perspective, you're doing security, IT systems, in some cases industrial control systems, It's not that much different. It's more the purpose for it, right? How it's being leveraged and used, and the fact whether or not you get consumer experience. So I would suggest as you look at companies, as I said before, my previous role was all IT security, like all IT without consumer facing. What Verizon has shown me and what I've learned the most is around the consumer facing aspect. And I would suggest to you, if you're going to pursue security and pursue it in a way that you want to move into a senior role, a senior leadership role, that getting that consumer experience is important. Industrial control system security is also equally important. And so what I would do is try to round yourself out as you build your career out over your time ahead of you. Wherever you start, keep looking at how can you get broader experiences and exposure to look at security from different angles, right? To look at it from a technology angle or a business angle, right? That becomes important. We buy cyber insurance, right? So cyber insurance, it's a new industry, new cottage industry within insurance. We buy cyber insurance. Well, you have to, as a business person, understand what it means to buy insurance. And it's not about what the adversary is doing and the greatest last piece of malware that they sent over your way. It's literally the business aspect of, I'm buying an insurance policy for cyber-related things. So I would encourage that you look at breadth, or you can also specialize. We've got some folks that are tremendous experts in industrial control system security. And that's an area that's taking off. If you think about IoT, right, more industrial control systems are going to be IP enabled than ever before. So those are some suggestions I have. Thank you for the question. Others? Don't be shy.
We have a question from Poll Everywhere.
So information security is about being both proactive and reactive.
Mm-hmm.
How does Verizon handle these two aspects differently, and which do you feel is more important?
So I believe reactive, when you look at a cyber resiliency model, reactive is on one end of the spectrum, and proactive is on another end, and adaptive is beyond that. So I think about not being reactive, I think about being proactive and adaptive. Does that make sense? And what proactive looks like means that not only are you doing prevention to a very high degree, you're very agile in your detection and in your response. Now, we are responding to cyber incidents each and every day at Verizon. We have denial of service attacks regularly, right? But we built technology to be able to deal with them and black hole, and do other things like that. So you build technology to allow you to stay in that proactive, and then in the adaptive stage, what you're able to do is more predictive analytics. How's the adversary coming at you, given what they do and their normal mode of operandi? How are they going to come at you next and next and next? Does that help? Many companies, though, are still in the reactive mode, which is why the industries are having challenges with lower tier companies. And on that point, I would suggest to you, as you consider companies to go work for, there are a lot of companies that say they do security. But what you need to ask questions like, how much are you investing in your security programs? What has been your year-over-year growth in your security investment? How do you view cybersecurity strategically? What are your strategic objectives around cybersecurity? Because I think none of you would really want to go work for a company that says, yeah, we do cyber, we need to come do cyber, and then you get there and you realize, well, it's words on a sheet of paper, but there's no leadership at the company level, there's not the resources that are needed to do it well. And how many of you want to be at a company that doesn't do it well? Especially if it's your profession, right? I would never want to work for a security or a company that doesn't do cybersecurity well and isn't investing in it. And that's going to be the state of play for the next 5 to 10 years. You're at a very fortunate time to be studying in this field and even more importantly, launching into this field in terms of the early years of your professional career. Thank you. Others? Yes. We're moving the mic over.
Yeah, so you mentioned having a breadth of, in terms of looking at information
I'm sorry, I
security.
can't hear you that well.
I'm sorry, you mentioned having a breadth of information security, looking at it from different angles. I just want to know, is it possible to leverage enterprise architecture and security, or is security too big of a beast that requires its own career?
I can't hear you that well. Either need to turn up the volume or...
So you mentioned that it's good to have a breadth in terms of looking at information security from different angles.
Yes.
And I just want to know, is it possible to leverage enterprise architecture with security, or is it too big of a beast and requires its own career, so to speak?
No, I think, and even though I didn't speak about it, enterprise architecture and security architecture is a key component of the overall design, build, operate model, right? So if you don't, from an enterprise architecture perspective, if you don't design in for specific security requirements, right? If you don't design them in from the beginning, whether it's high availability, the systems design themselves, how they'll operate under duress, under cyber attack, when you go to bolt it on later, it's much harder to do. So I have a team that works for me that's cyber architects that work with our enterprise architects for any of the major systems we deploy. They build reference architectures. And those reference architectures are key because it kind of sets the standard by which we will build and operate, design, build, and operate our systems and provide the appropriate level of protection depending on the type of, the level of security we need to deliver, right? And the other key about that is not everything needs to be put in a Fort Knox vault, right? The security needs to marry the level of protection that's required for the data or the system that you're trying to provide protections for, right? Does that help?
Yeah,
Yes. There aren't enough enterprise architects and security architects, so if you're interested in pursuing that, companies would be very interested in speaking with you. Yes, please.
Do you think there should be more global scrutiny on like the notification requirements, like such as like in UK how like they're fining people? Do you think there should be like a more global standard for that?
So the question was about, do I believe there should be a more of a global standard as it pertains to data privacy regulations and enforcement? What I will say is, yes, I would like to see us move towards that. I don't know that we could ever get to it. If you look at the US alone, every state has their own state data breach laws, and they're varying, right? So within the US alone, you have to deal with a lot of variation in what the requirements are around there. Then when you move globally, different countries have different levels of expectations. And then when you marry that with, well, I'm running a global system, I have global employees. I have employees from in 150 countries, right? I have data moving all different places. I have to worry about data sovereignty, which means where does the data reside, in which country, where can it move to? If I have to go do incident response and do forensics, can I take that data out of the country or not? You know, am I taking the data from different SOCs or security operations centers and moving it into one country? What does that mean? So yes, it's very confusing right now. And would I like to see some standardization occur? Absolutely. Because I believe what that would do is it would enable companies to deliver a standard set of capabilities and responses. But when you lose data, like in the case where we lost data recently, that data set that Verizon lost had more than 40 countries to it. So we had to do a legal analysis on what, you know, everybody had something a little bit different. It would have been much easier. We could have accelerated the notifications if, you know, if it was one standard with which we put it through the lens of that. Does that help? I don't know that we'll see it. I don't know what we will see that, because I think everybody has their own view. Much like different government agencies have their own view of what you should be doing in terms of your information security practices and standards, right? You got ISO 27000 run, you got NIST CSF, you got COBIT, you got a whole bunch of other ones out there. I don't see that we'll ever get to one specific standard, and so companies like ourselves are having to say, well, we're going to do multiples of these. Or create a map, say we do things this way and it maps this way to ISO and it maps this way to NIST and it maps this way to COBIT, this way to ITIL. So yeah, there's a lot of work that has to be done on figuring all that out, and then not only what the requirements are, but how do you make the systems that we have work towards that? And oh, by the way, if you have a system that's been in place for years, and you get a new regulation, you got to go back in and say, well, the technology I have, will it work to allow me to do what I need to do in the future? So that's where we need creative problem solving and an ability to think strategically and tactically about solving those problems and then turning it into technology that just does things, so we don't have to have a lot of humans doing things. You know, we want the brain power to be in the solutions and the automation, not in filling out checklists for, you know, for each standard or things like that. But that's a great question. Any others? Probably have time for one or two more, if there's interest.
We have some on Poll Everywhere.
Great.
So Penn State and the College of IST have an ever-growing security program. As a CISO, what do you look for in students pursuing careers in the security industry?
I look for strong technical depth, the ability to do creative problem solving. I also look for, cybersecurity is a broad field. In certain areas where I'm looking for my cyber incident response technologists, my CERT analysts, right, who are doing what I would call intelligence fusion, I'm looking for a very unique skill set that requires both left brain and right brain thinking, in terms of you got to think about what the adversary would do and do motivational, psychological, how the psychology of the attacker, and then marry it with the technology of how would they come at us and do that. So there are some niche roles that have some very specialized left brain, right brain thinking. I think the other thing is, from a security perspective, most security teams in every company, they're lean. They're very lean. So when you come in, you need to be able to create more value than what the company's paying you for. And you have to know that when they're bringing in a security resource and they're bringing you to the team, they need you to be 110%. Because it's not like other functions at other companies where they may have the luxury of additional resources. In security, it's lean, it's mean, and for the companies that are investing, they're investing to do two things. One is bolster existing capability, right? More people doing this task over here that needs to be done. Or two, building new capabilities that they don't have, right? So your ability to, from a teamwork perspective, to get in on that former and create more horsepower for a specific initiative that a company has in a project is important. But secondly, if you come in and you're asked to help stand up a new capability, there is no playbook. They're going to say, this is what I tell my team. Directionally, I want to go here. I need my people, my process, and technology to deliver this for me. Go figure it out. Come back and tell me how much it's going to cost and when you can deliver it. Now, soon you can deliver it, because I needed it yesterday, which is why I hired you. So those are a couple of things that companies are looking for, and specifically I would be looking for. Okay. I think we're at close.
I think
Yes?
we're there.
Yep.
Hopefully this is working now. Yes, I think we're there. So please join me in thanking Chandra for a very interesting
Thanks.
talk.
Thanks, everyone.
And I guess that's it for this session, and we'll see you at other sessions.
Hopefully at the